clink of fine crystal was the soundtrack of her humiliation. Alara's fingers, slick with nervous sweat, tightened around the stem of her water glass. Across the table, the man, Aidan Thorne, was a study in effortless power. His suit was a dark liquid shadow. His posture relaxed, yet his gaze held an intensity that felt like a physical weight. He was the third blind date her well-meaning but tragically misguided cousin Sarah had set up this month. The first had been a fitness fanatic who'd suggested a walk that turned into a 5-mile death march. The second had spent the entire evening talking about his mother's perfect meatloaf. Aidan was different. He was quiet, observant, his eyes missing nothing, and that was what made it worse. "So Sarah tells me you're a graphic designer," he said, his voice a low baritone that vibrated through the quiet hum of the exclusive restaurant. Alara nodded, forcing a smile that felt like a crack in porcelain. "Yes, mostly branding for small businesses. I actually did the logo for that new artisan bakery on Elm Street." She gestured with her hand, a fluttery, nervous movement. She was proud of that logo. It was one of her best pieces. "The one with the intertwined wheat stalks? It's elegant," he remarked, and for a fleeting second a spark of genuine pleasure warmed her chest. He'd noticed. He'd actually seen it, but the warmth was immediately doused by the icy voice in her head, the one that had been her constant companion since high school. "He's just being polite. Look at him. Look at you. This is a cosmic joke." She was acutely aware of the way the silk of her best dress, a bold emerald green she'd chosen for courage, strained slightly across her middle. She felt the press of her own thighs against the plush chair. She was a Rubens painting in a room full of Modiglianis, and every glance from the other diners felt like a critique. The waiter arrived with their appetizers, a delicate tower of beetroot and goat cheese for her, a seared scallop on a bed of pea puree for him. As the plate was set before her, her stomach churned with the familiar cocktail of desire and self-loathing. She loved food. She loved the artistry of it, the comfort of it. But every bite felt like a transgression, a confirmation of a failure she wore on her body for all to see. "Everything okay?" Aidan asked, his fork poised mid-air. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice thick, almost too beautiful to eat. He smiled, a small, genuine curve of his lips that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "Nonsense. The beauty is in the consumption. It's a compliment to the chef." She took a small bite. It was sublime. But the enjoyment was poisoned. The conversation stuttered and stumbled. He asked about her work, her interests, her thoughts on a recent film. She answered in monosyllables, her mind screaming, "Why is he even here? What could a man like him possibly see in me? He's a CEO, for God's sake. He probably has a supermodel waiting at home." The main course arrived, a perfectly cooked piece of sea bass for her, a steak for him. The silence between them grew heavier, punctuated only by the soft clatter of cutlery. Alara could feel the end of the evening approaching, the inevitable polite rejection. "I had a lovely time, we should do this again sometime." The universal code for never. She couldn't bear it. The pity in his eyes, the charade. It was better to end it herself, to say the words before he could, to own the humiliation rather than have it bestowed upon her. She put her fork down with a definitive click. The sound made him look up. "You don't have to do this, you know," she said, her voice trembling barely above a whisper. Aidan's brow furrowed slightly. "Do what?" "This," and she gestured weakly between them. "The whole date. I know what this is. I'm not an idiot. Alara, I'm not sure what you—" "Please." She cut him off, a hot tear escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. She swiped at it angrily. "Let's just save us both the time. I'm the nice girl your assistant or your cousin or whoever set you up with, because they felt sorry for the lonely plus-sized woman. I'm the charity case before you go back to your real life with your real, thin, acceptable partners." She took a shaky breath, the words she'd heard her entire life, from cruel boys in school, from subtle aunts at family gatherings, from the mirror every single day, tumbling out in a torrent of pain. "No one marries a fat girl, sir," she said, the old-fashioned deferential "sir" slipping out, making the statement sound even more pathetic and final. "They just don't, so thank you for dinner. It was very kind of you." She reached for her napkin, intending to place it on the table and flee, to find a dark corner where she could sob in peace. This was why she never went on dates. This was why she built a life of quiet contentment with her work and her cat. It was safer. The heart couldn't be broken if it was never offered. But Aidan's hand moved, not to stop her, but to cover hers. His touch was warm, firm, grounding. She froze, her eyes wide and swimming with tears meeting his, and he smiled. It wasn't a smile of pity. It wasn't a smile of condescension. It was a slow, deep, transformative smile that reached his storm-gray eyes and lit them from within. It was a smile of fierce, undeniable resolve. "Ilara," he said, his voice low and steady. "A vow made in a hushed, expensive restaurant. Let's prove them all wrong." The world stopped. The clinking crystal faded. The murmur of other conversations dissolved. There was only his hand on hers, his gaze holding hers, and those 7 words hanging in the air between them like a challenge and a promise. What?" she stammered, her mind reeling. This wasn't the script. The script was awkward goodbyes and a lonely Uber ride home. "You heard me?" Aiden said, his thumb stroking a gentle, soothing arc over her knuckles. "All of them. Every single person who ever made you feel less than the breathtaking woman you are. Let's prove them wrong." "You don't mean that," she whispered, pulling her hand back, needing the space to think. This is a joke. Or some kind of savior complex." He leaned back, his smile softening but not fading. "I am many things, Ilara, a CEO, a strategist, a man who recognizes value in business and in people. I am not a man who jokes about something like this. And I have no desire to be a savior, only a partner." "A partner in what?" she asked, bewildered. "In this, in us." He said it with such simple, unshakable conviction that her breath hitched. "I've spent the last hour with a woman who is clever, talented, and has more quiet strength in her little finger than most of the people I negotiate with have in their entire bodies. And all you can see is a dress size. I find that unacceptable." He signaled for the check, his eyes never leaving hers. "So here is my proposition. We leave this restaurant. We continue this date. And we see where it goes. No expectations, no pressure. Just 2 people getting to know each other, with the express understanding that we are both fully aware of the societal narrative, and we have chosen to disregard it completely." Ilara's heart was a wild drum in her chest. It was insane. It was the most reckless, terrifying, and beautiful thing anyone had ever said to her. He was offering her not just a date, but a rebellion, a shared secret war against the voices in her head and the world outside. She looked at his extended hand, not to shake, but to hold. She looked at his face, open and earnest, slowly, tentatively, like a creature emerging from a long hibernation. She placed her hand in his. "Okay," she breathed, and his smile returned, brilliant and triumphant. "Okay." He paid the bill without glancing at the total and guided her out of the restaurant, his hand a warm, steady presence on the small of her back. It felt possessive, protective, real. Outside, the night air was cool against her flushed skin. His car, a sleek dark sedan, pulled up silently. "Where are we going?" she asked, a thrill of adventure coursing through her. Aiden opened the door for her, his eyes glinting in the city lights. "To write a new story." The new story began with midnight walks through neon-lit streets where they talked about everything and nothing. It continued with lazy Saturday afternoons in art galleries, his hand forever finding hers. It was filled with texts that made her laugh out loud, and phone calls that lasted until the early hours, their conversations a tapestry of shared dreams and quiet confessions. Aiden was relentless in his mission. He celebrated her. He filled her apartment with flowers the color of her emerald dress. He commissioned her to redesign his company's branding, not as a favor, but because, as he stated in the board meeting, her vision is exactly what we need. He introduced her to his world, a world of galas and business dinners, and never once did his grip on her waist falter. Never once did his gaze hold anything but pride. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, Ilara began to believe him. The cruel voice in her head grew quieter, replaced by the echo of his. Breathtaking. Clever. Strong. She started buying clothes that fit her body, not the body she wished she had. She stood a little taller. She laughed a little louder. The world, which had always felt like a judge, began to feel like a canvas. 6 months after that first fateful dinner, Aiden took her to a secluded cliffside overlooking the city. The lights twinkled below like a carpet of fallen stars. He got down on one knee, pulled out a simple, stunning diamond ring, and asked her to marry him. She said yes. The word a sob of pure, unadulterated joy. The wedding was a small, exquisite affair. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone anymore. It was a celebration of their private universe. Ilara wore a gown that made her feel like a queen. Aiden's eyes, when he saw her walking down the aisle, held a sheen of tears that mirrored her own. They built a life, a beautiful, chaotic, wonderful life. He was the rock, the steady anchor in the storm of her occasional lingering insecurities. She was the color, the music, the unexpected joy in his structured, high-pressure world. They were, against all the odds she had ever believed in, deliriously happy. 5 years later, they were preparing for the biggest adventure of all. Ilara was 8 months pregnant, her body swelling with a new life, a new kind of power. They were in the nursery, a sun-drenched room painted a soft, buttery yellow. Aiden was assembling the crib, muttering under his breath about incomprehensible instructions, while Ilara sat in a rocking chair folding impossibly small onesies. She watched him, her heart so full she thought it might burst. This man, this brilliant, powerful, kind man who had looked at her crumpled, tear-stained self in a restaurant and seen a future. "You know," she said, her voice soft with contentment, "I sometimes think about that night. Our first date." Aiden looked up from a stubborn screw, a smile playing on his lips. "The night you tried to fire me as your date?" She laughed. "Yes, that night. I was so convinced, so sure of how the world worked. I had built this entire fortress of self-protection around my heart, and you just walked right through it." He put the screwdriver down and came to kneel before her, his hands resting on her knees. "It was the easiest and most important strategic decision I ever made." She ran her fingers through his hair. "What made you do it, really? I've never quite understood. You could have had anyone. A model, a heiress, anyone. Why the crying fat girl in the green dress?" Aiden's smile faded into something more profound, more serious. He took her hands in his thumbs tracing the platinum wedding band she wore. "Ilara," he began, his voice thick with an emotion she couldn't quite place. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." A flicker of unease, cold and sharp, pierced her bubble of happiness. "What is it?" He took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on their joined hands. "That night, it wasn't a blind date." The world tilted slightly. "What do you mean?" Sarah set it up. "She gave me your number. I asked her to," he said quietly. "I sought her out. I orchestrated the entire thing." Ilara's mind raced, scrambling for purchase. "Why, I don't understand. Had you seen me before?" "Yes," he whispered, his eyes finally lifting to meet hers. They were filled with a decades-old pain. "I saw you every day for a year. In the hallways of Northwood High. You sat 2 rows ahead of me in Mr. Davison's English class." Northwood High. The epicenter of her teenage anguish. She searched his face, the strong jaw, the intense gray eyes, trying to strip away the years, the success, the polish. And then, like a ghost emerging from the fog, she saw him. Not Aiden Thorne, CEO. But Aiden, the quiet, painfully thin scholarship student with glasses too big for his face and clothes from a thrift store. The boy who was bullied for being poor, for being smart, for being an easy target. "Aiden," she breathed, the name from the past feeling foreign on her tongue. He nodded, a single tear escaping and tracing a path down his cheek. "You were the only one who was ever kind to me. When they'd shove me into lockers or steal my lunch money. You were the one who would sometimes, when no one was looking, slip a note into my locker. Just a stupid cartoon or a hang in there. You never spoke to me, you never acknowledged me in the hallways, you couldn't. Your social standing was already too precarious. But you saw me. You were drowning in your own insecurities and you still threw a lifeline to someone you thought was drowning worse." Ilara's hand flew to her mouth, a sob catching in her throat. She remembered. She remembered the scrawny boy, the constant target. She remembered the fierce, protective empathy she'd felt. An empathy she'd been too terrified to show publicly. The notes had been her secret rebellion. "I loved you for that," Aiden said, his voice raw. "I loved your hidden strength. I carried those notes with me for years. They were my talisman. When I built my company, when I made my fortune, you were my why. I wanted to become a man who was worthy of walking up to you and not being invisible. I spent years building myself into someone who could stand beside you without being a source of your further humiliation." He cupped her face, his touch infinitely gentle. "And then I found you, and you were more beautiful, more brilliant than I had ever dreamed. And you looked at me, this man you thought was a stranger, and you saw only the surface. You saw the suit, the success, and you immediately assumed the worst. You believed the same cruel hierarchy that had tortured us both, and when you said no one marries a fat girl, sir, it shattered me. Because the girl who had saved me, the woman I had loved my entire life, was still a prisoner of that same ugly lie. He wiped her tears away with his thumbs, so I smiled, and I said, let's prove them all wrong. But what I meant was, let me prove you wrong. Let me show you the magnificent person I have always known you to be. Let me love you the way you deserve to be loved, since we were both just two broken kids trying to survive. Alara couldn't speak. The twist of the knife was not one of betrayal, but of a love so vast, so patient, so profoundly deep that it rewrote her entire history. He hadn't fallen in love with her in a restaurant. He had been in love with her for half his life. His love wasn't a rebellion against the world. It was a homecoming. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his, their tears mingling. You proved them wrong, she whispered, her voice cracking with the weight of a truth finally set free. You proved us all wrong. In the quiet of the sunlit nursery, surrounded by the promise of their future, the two broken kids from Northwood High finally, completely, healed each other. The story wasn't about a CEO and a fat girl. It was about two souls who had found their way back to each other, and in doing so had found their way home.